Hello there, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Celeste. Today I'm excited to share some October and autumnal reads, some cozy reads, some spooky reads, and some books for the Victober challenge, which takes place every year at this time, in which you have to read a work of Victorian literature. And so grab yourself a mug of something hot and steaming. As you can see here, I have my nice mug of Lady Grey tea. Get a nice cozy blanket, get into your favorite chair or even in your bed, and let's talk books for October. First up, I'd like to share the books that I read to participate in the 2022 Victober challenge. Now, if you didn't know, Victober is a challenge. It happens every year on BookTube, in which people enjoy and chat about works of Victorian literature. So that would be any work written during the reign of Queen Victoria between the years 1837 and 1901. I'll link some of the channels of the booktubers who host this challenge down below so that you can check out their work as well. This year, Victober included a challenge to read a Bildungsroman or coming-of-age story. As well, another of the challenges was to read a work which features chronic illness or has disability representation. I feel that this book covers both of those bases, and as many others have done, I chose Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I love Jane Eyre. I know a lot of people have issues with it from a feminist perspective, and I would like to cover that topic perhaps in a separate video. But for right now, let me just say that I agree with Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, who says it's a gateway drug to other works of Victorian literature. And I really love my particular volume here, which is from the 1940s. It includes illustrations, wood engravings actually, by Fritz Eichenberg, and it was published through New York Random House in 1943. And they're just gorgeous. Take a look at the back cover. It really communicates that sort of October, November Gothic feel. And this is, of course, Jane Eyre at Lowood, and in the line of little girls. Great copy of this book. Let me just show you some of these illustrations. Oh, let's see. Look at that. Gorgeous, gorgeous. So, I love Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is one of those Victorian novels that's indelibly impressed upon my soul. Years ago, I also edited a literary website / journal, and I even called it the Thornfield Review. It was a review of literature written by women, specifically women's novels, and I named it after the hall in Jane Eyre, Thornfield Hall. I love the characters in Jane Eyre. I know there's a great deal of criticism regarding the character of Edward Rochester and Jane's slightly dysfunctional relationship with him, not to mention Bertha Rochester, the mad woman in the attic. However, I think you really need to view Jane Eyre through the lens of the time it was written in. I know everybody always says that, but if you view Jane as a proto-feminist ahead of her time, you'll enjoy the work a lot more than if you view it through a fourth wave feminist lens of today. Jane stays true to herself. She's resilient, she's strong, she remains committed to her own moral code, she's intelligent, she's passionate, and when her circumstances change and she gains wealth, agency, access, and a sense of personal power, she still chooses Edward Rochester. So we as readers may not care for her choice, but she made her choice. It was her choice, and I see strength in that. Also, the greatest character in Jane Eyre is not human. I believe it's the landscape and the houses and institutions, and that's what I love about all of the Bronte sister novels. And in fact, My favorite Bronte sister is Anne Bronte. Don't forget that Anne Bronte wrote Agnes Grey years, was it years? Well, it was before Jane Eyre. So this was sort of a prototype that Charlotte drew upon when she wrote Jane Eyre. And I think more people should read Agnes Grey and Anne Bronte in general. In fact, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is actually my favorite Bronte novel of all time. There was also a part of the Victober challenge, which was to read a Victorian book and then watch a screen adaptation of it. And so I did that as well. I rewatched the Ruth Wilson, Toby Stephens television series. Toby Stephens, if you're watching, I love you. I think you're a fantastic actor. And so I rewatched that. I own that on DVD. And then I also watched for the first time the Cary Fukunaga movie version, which I feel is very true and very rich and beautiful to watch. That's a movie version of Jane Eyre. And as well, our local theatrical company put on a stage production of Jane Eyre. So I did attend that recently with my sister-in-law as well and really enjoyed that. Well, another challenge was to read a Victorian short story, and I know a million people are going to choose this as well, but hey, it's good. Arthur Conan Doyle's The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. So my favorite in this collection is The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, and that involves the theft of a near priceless gemstone called the Blue Carbuncle, believe it or not. And it also involves a sort of comedy of errors as Holmes and Watson try to track it down, and in their journeys encounter a commissioner, a plumber, and a Christmas goose. I love that this is set at Christmas time, so it has sort of a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle / Dickensian feel to it, perfect as October, November, and December come on. And as well, I've been watching not only the Jeremy Brett Granada TV series, but also on Audible, I've been enjoying downloading and listening to versions of the short stories as read by Edward Hardwicke. Now, Edward Hardwicke is one of the actors who portrayed John Watson in the Granada series. So, and it's just great to hear the Holmes stories in his voice. So, yeah, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, fantastic. And as well, I also decided to give a reread to The Hound of the Baskervilles. What a great atmospheric book this is, set on the moors, and you know, there's Baskerville, Sir Charles Baskerville, and he's the heir, and Holmes and Watson have to protect him and discover the truth about the glowing hound. So this is a great one. It's a rather short read, it's easy to manage, and it's just a lot of fun. So always a good perennial choice for this time of year. And finally, for the Victober Challenge 2022, you were supposed to read a Victorian poem. Now, this is easy for me. I am a poet. I write poetry. I edit poetry. I've published poetry. I love poetry. So I chose Christina Rosetti's Goblin Market. This is published by Batsford. And the illustrations are by Georgie McCausland, and they're really whimsical and wonderful. Now, of course, I love the illustrations that were done by Dante Gabriel Rosetti, but these are beautiful as well, very fairy tale-ish. And this is the story of two sisters, and Laura and Lizzie, and they go to a stream bed each night to draw water and are lured by the song and plaintive chant of the goblin merchants who try to sell their fruits. And of course, you know these fruits are enchanted, right? And this illustrated version of the book is just gorgeous. Take a look here. Love it. Love it, love it. One of the things I find really interesting about Victorian literature that involves younger people, and you do get the sense that Laura and Lizzie are fairly young in this, you also get the sense in Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland Through the Looking Glass, and in some other works too. Like recently I read The Lark by E. Nesbit, and I find this with the children she depicts as well, that even though they seem like young people, they're often apparently living on their own, or if there are guardians, they are not in the picture. And so that's kind of an interesting trope in Victorian literature that I've been noticing. And I don't see any guardians or parental characters in this story either. They seem to be alone in their house and alone with their problems, especially after one of them consumes the goblin fruit. Well, as the days get shorter in October and November, I thought this next one was quite fitting as well. It's actually a poetry collection, and it's called A Nature Poem for Every Night of the Year. It's edited by Jane McMorland Hunter, and it's really just a lovely collection. I highly recommend adding it if you're a poetry lover like I am. This divides the sections into the months of the year, so it's sort of like a poetic almanac. The poems are nature focused, and there's just a lovely selection. I believe they are all British poets. Not 100% sure about that, but I think it does focus on British poets. But just some lovely choices in here. I, of course, always appreciate the Thomas Hardy poems, but every single one is worth a read and worth your time. So do check this one out. It's great to keep by your autumnal bedside table if you want just something quick to read and to think about each night. It's lovely. Then I picked up another beautiful book. It's a very artistic book. It's the Book of the Raven, Corvids in Art and Legend. And this is by Carolyn Roberts and Angus Hyland. And even the end papers are beautiful. Just look at that. Those are the feathers, of course, of the raven. And this is sort of a compendium. It's another book that's great to keep on your bedside table in the autumn. It's full of beautiful art. And it just talks about ravens and corvids throughout history. There's little literary quotes in here. There are Japanese wood blocks. There are quotes from Game of Thrones and the use of ravens in Game of Thrones. There's, of course, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And then the augury or predicting the future. And it talks about the nursery rhyme One for Sorrow. So this is just a really lovely, lovely collection of information about ravens and corvids, and I'm keeping it next to my bedside table with my tea. Well, speaking of corvids and ravens and magpies, and One for Sorrow, I'm also reading Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. I'm in the middle of it right now and truly enjoying it. Anthony Horowitz wrote for the series Midsummer Murders, and it really shows in this, which is probably one of the reasons I enjoy it. It's also a bit Agatha Christie-esque, so I'm enjoying that aspect of it as well. And it's kind of a mystery within a mystery, a book about a book. I'll read you a little bit from the back cover here. Alan Conway is a best-selling crime writer. His editor, Susan Ryland, has worked with him for years. She's familiar with his detective Atticus Pund, who solves mysteries disturbing sleepy English villages. And so it's about the manuscript that Alan Conway wrote. And there are, of course, several murders which take place in it, but then the novel expands and becomes about something kind of bigger. So It's really fun reading. It's not a difficult read, and I'm also truly, truly enjoying simultaneously listening to it on Audible. And Samantha Bond is the actress who narrates part of it, and then the other part is narrated by, I think his name is Alan Cordner. I know his last name is Cordner. He's very good. He has a fantastic voice, and I'm really looking forward to reading other works or listening to other works that he narrates, rather. I know he does The Book Thief, for example. So, yeah, and I'll definitely be reading the other book in this series by Anthony Horowitz, which I believe is The Moonflower Murders. I know that it was available as a TV series on British television, and it is coming to the United States at the end of this month. So I wanted to make sure that I read this before I start watching that. So, Magpie Murders. Another book of short stories that's great for the dark nights of autumn is Dark Matter, A Century of Speculative Fiction from the African Diaspora. It's edited by Sheree Renee Thomas. I was fortunate enough to host the study of this in a library book club, and Sheree Renee Thomas, the editor, actually signed up to attend the discussion. I was incredibly flattered and very excited, and I did have an opportunity to interview her during a Zoom meeting where our book club discussed Dark Matter. There are so many great speculative sci-fi stories in here that have kind of a spooky aspect to them. And my favorites, I would have to say, are, there's also some essays in here, but my favorites are Can You Wear My Eyes by Kalamuya Salam. Also, Greedy Choke Puppy by Nalo Hopkinson is a fantastic one. And The Evening and the Morning and the Night by Octavia Butler. And it's just a fantastic collection. If you're a sci-fi fan, you must add this to your collection. And Sheree Renee Thomas, you were so kind, so generous, so gracious, and thank you again for signing up for our little Newark Library Book Club discussion. It was fantastic. And finally, this is not the version of this book that I want to own. I did get this one from the library, but I'm ordering the English version of this. It's Mudlark by Lara Maiklem. Lara Maiklem is a mudlark, which means that she searches the shallows and muddy banks of rivers such as the Thames River. And she finds the remnants of civilization that have a story behind them. So everything from Roman shoe leather to Victorian hat pins, all of these objects that she finds, clay pipes, and they have a provenance. And you know, I'm just fascinated with those sorts of things, the story of social history through objects, told through objects. So I believe the British version of this is called Mudlarking, and it's more lavishly illustrated. This is kind of just a, you know, the text, which is fine. It's a good read, but if you plan on buying this book, I would recommend the other edition, and it's got kind of a blue and cream colored cover. So look for that as well. And if you don't know Lara's website or her Facebook page, actually especially the Facebook page, I would recommend check that out as well, because she'll feature an object from her hunting on the foreshore in the mud, and then she'll tell the story behind it. So it's like a little social history lesson basically almost every day if you like and follow her page on Facebook. Well, those are all of my choices for October and for an autumnal cozy reading list. What are you reading? Are you participating in Victober? I'd love to hear what you've chosen to read for this year's challenges, and just your reads in general, if you're reading some good cozy mysteries or other works or some short stories that you're keeping by your bedside table. that are nice for a cool autumnal evening where you cozy in with a good blanket or in your favorite armchair. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And until next time, happy reading.